Hola, hola, bienvenidos, bienvenidas. Welcome to our session today. I am so excited to connect with everyone on the line. Thank you, Meg, for the introduction. I'm Wendy from Power to Fly, joining from my home in Argentina. And today I'm going to moderate an exciting panel discussion, Promote Yourself, Level Up Your Career with a Personal Board of Directors. Now, we all hit that point in our careers where we need to promote ourselves, whether it's an annual review, a step up in our current career, or working towards a new opportunity. And yet we know as Latinas, we have a harder time doing so because some of the cultural values we learn, like work hard and keep your head down, sometimes doesn't match up with those goals. So today we'll be discussing how that personal board of directors can guide us and prepare us for these moments. So let's jump right into it and meet our amazing panelists whose backgrounds represent the Latinx community. Maite, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Thank you so much, Wendy. And hi, everybody. My name is Maite Zabaleta, and I'm a director of product management here at Salesforce. A little bit more about me. I've been at Salesforce for about 4 years. I work currently in the Service Cloud, and I lead 3 products, self-service, incident management, and case management. Definitely did not start as a product manager. When I started my career, I was a production engineer in manufacturing, and I went to grad school and transitioned my way into software PMing. So very excited to be here today and share a bit with you on how I used a board of directors to just help me build my career. And I'll pass it on to Alexandra.
Perfect. I am Alex Caldwell-Wenman. I am a Senior Director of Product Management at Salesforce on Tableau. I lead our monetization, licensing, and migrations for our Tableau core products. And this is actually my second career. I used to design women's clothing, and I went back to school and got an MBA, and through a circuitous series of events, ended up in product at a tech company. And I just really loved it and never looked back.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Maite. And I love hearing about those career shifts. So in today's session, we're going to talk about how to level up those careers with that personal board of directors. So let's just start with a baseline definition of the term. So the personal board of directors is at its core your professional support system. So it's the group of people that know you as a professional, but then also as a person. So they know your career aspirations, the people that you feel comfortable going to for advice, for guidance, for mentorships, and of course that gut check when you're really questioning, what should you do next. Maite, would you say that this term, personal board of directors, resonates with you?
You know what, Wendy, it does. I have to be honest, I haven't really used it like that. I would say until recently that I heard it more, but I think that we know that it takes a village, right? Like it's definitely tough out there. In having a group of people, and I would say like a good mix, right? Could be like, peers that act like coaches, people that you look up to, that could be mentors, and people that you aspire, right? Like you're inspired by their career, can be part of that group. So I would say that it's always been something that I rely on, but I didn't really formally call it that, I would say until a couple of years ago, but I do think it's a very important tool for everybody to be able to leverage.
Love that. Love that. And I totally agree with you there. We all have the best intentions, but it's really nice to have that village, those directors, that personal board of directors that can really support you. So this personal board of directors can be made up of a couple of different people that can provide different functions in our lives. And so I want to break that down into kind of 3 different functions, and those can be coaches, mentors, or sponsors. So a coach can really help guide us through a specific situation, like a tough relationship with a coworker, or really working through a difficult situation with your manager. And on the other hand, a mentor is going to be someone that is more senior than you. So they can provide like advice, perspective, and then wisdom from their, wealth of experience. So finally, we do have sponsors. And so these are the people who bet on you, especially when you're not in the room. Those are people rallying behind you and really wanting you to succeed. So they're putting their reputations on the line for your name. So I want to ask another question, Maite. I'm going to start with you, and then Alex, we're going to move on to you. When you're thinking of building out this group of people to support you, whether it's a coach or mentor or a sponsor, how do you go about it? Are you formal about it, or how do you get over the nerves of asking someone to really fill in one of those roles?
That is a great question. I think it's a combination of two things. And I think I want to level set a little bit. At the end of the day, we're all people, right? Like we love to connect one another. And to be honest, it could be at the beginning a bit of a numbers game and also being really open about it. Like if you go to conferences, if you meet people organically and you see a connection, definitely leverage that, right? Also, if you know people through, your networks in the university or other avenues that they might be a little bit more removed, I would say, then not being afraid of like reaching out, right? And doing an introduction and kind of highlighting why are you reaching out and, how, this could be, mutually beneficial, right? So I know that feels a little bit scarier, like, oh, you're reaching out to someone that you may not know directly, right? But I would put it this way. At the end of the day, is about chemistry and a little bit of a numbers game. The more people that you reach out to, you might find people that you find a really good connection, and really great relationships start with a first talk, right? So don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid to leverage all the networks that you may have, right? And put yourself out there, right? And maybe you have somebody in mind and it didn't really quite become a good fit, but after talking to a few people, you might see like, hey, this is a really great relationship that I can build, even over years.
Yeah,
I love that one.
Oh, no, sorry. I was gonna say, I completely agree. I tend to at least think of my board of directors as people that I've kind of gathered informally over the years. But Maite's right. They actually they all kind of formed out of like networking or like people that knew people that introduced me to them. And I think it's also, as you mentioned, really important to fill that board of directors out with different kinds of people, because you can then have people that you can go to with different circumstances. And at least for me, having it be very informal really has helped, because they can get to know me as a person and I can get to know them as a person. And it really builds a relationship that goes over the span of years, because then they get to know who you are and how you operate. And so when you encounter different circumstances, they can do a much better job of guiding you or giving you advice, because it's not just that one like 20 or 30-minute window where they're like, oh, okay, we're gonna talk, but it's really been built on a relationship that's long-standing.
I love that, Alex. Just more building the relationship and not a transactional relationship at all. Shout out to our fans in the chat. Y'all that are tuning in, if you have questions for Alex or Maite, definitely add them and we'll get to them during the chat. So I'm going to keep things going. And I have another question for y'all. I'd love to get your perspective on what value can people take away, even from just considering this personal board of directors concept? Why should we put effort into building this kind of career support system, this village that's going to support us professionally? And then particularly when we think about Latinas in tech, how does that relate? Maite, I'll pass it to you first.
Thank you. So that's a really great question. I think that for me, the board of directors does two things. One of them, it really helps provide perspective. I really like how you framed the situation a little bit earlier, right? Like sometimes you just need a gut check, right? And there's different types of people in your board of directors. Some of them could be coaches, they could be peers. And you may want to just reach out to say like, hey, am I reading the situation right? Like, would you have looked at it in a different direction? So really that perspective is incredibly valuable. Also, quite frankly, networking, like Alexandra mentioned, there are different roles that different people would fill in your board of directors, right? So there might be folks that have a path career-wise that you really admire, right? Like in connecting with them and asking you to basically over time help you open some of those doors is incredibly valuable as well. And definitely, I can definitely relate to that. Like it might not be very natural, especially if you're talking about getting out of your comfort zone and not only reaching out with folks where you naturally or organically can have a conversation, but just basically cold calling someone, that is also it's very powerful. But it was something that definitely takes a little getting used to, right? And having in the back of your brain the idea that, hey, it's a mutual beneficial conversation. And it's something that personally, as a Latina, took me a little bit to just get used to, right? To have that initiative of reaching out and having a natural conversation with someone that I have not made firsthand, in person.
Mhm. And then the thing that I would add to that, I think, is that, so at least in my case, my mom was the first one in her family to go to college. And so for me, being in the tech space, it wasn't like a natural thing that just I was born into. I think very few of us are, especially at my age. But basically, it gives you the opportunity to have people to talk to and to figure out how you navigate this space as you grow, because it can be very different depending on where you work and the circumstances that you encounter, to figure out, well, how do I show up in this space, potentially as a woman, as someone who's Hispanic, and really to kind of figure out how to navigate your way through that. And so having that board of directors can be incredibly helpful in helping you to kind of say like, oh, they've seen this before, or here's an approach that you might want to take because it's worked for them.
I love that. I love that. Thank you, Alex. And it is really hard to get over that hump of feeling comfortable reaching out for someone to support you like this. So we were getting a lot of questions in the chat. We're going to do one more question and then we'll come back to those questions on the chat, but keep those questions coming, audience. So I'm going to get a little bit more personal, Alex and Maite, on your personal board of directors. Now, you don't have to mention anyone by name, but can you share with us kind of who is someone that's on your board of directors and how they've helped you like navigate a challenge, a professional challenge, or a big growth opportunity in your career?
Let's see. Do you want to go first, Maite, or do you want me to?
You started. Go
Okay.
first. I'll take a second.
As I mentioned, I have a variety of different people. So some of the people who are on my board are people that are senior leaders from prior organizations that I've worked with. I find it really helpful, one, to have people who have been in those roles that I aspire to get to, but also people who are external to the organization that I'm currently a part of, because it brings that outside perspective. And then I also have people on my board who are maybe just a little bit more senior than me, or who have done the role for a little bit longer. And particularly as I transitioned into people management and having larger and larger teams, it was really great to have people to reach out to be like, hey, my team has encountered this issue, or this thing has happened. How do you handle it in your organization? Or when you have these kinds of metrics that you're measured against, how do you help your team navigate that circumstance? And so it's really great to just have that person to call all the time, to be able to kind of say, hey, here's the issue that I'm facing. How have you navigated it? And to be able to bounce ideas off of them. So yeah, that's incredibly wonderful. And I don't want to answer all the questions prematurely, but it's also great to have a person internal to your organization too. I tend to think of the sponsor as more internal to wherever I am, because when it's time for you, and I tell my team this a lot too, when it's time for promotions, like ultimately that goes up to someone else who may or may not know them. And so it's really great to have people who are champions for you in the room to be able to say, yeah, that person's fantastic. They really know their stuff. And then I think of mentors as maybe outside, they may be inside, but much more long running, kind of an arc relationship. Most of my mentors tend to be much more senior than me and have had a lot more experience. They can kind of use that arc of time in their experience to guide me a little bit. What about you, Maite?
Thank you so much, Alex. And plus one, everything that you said. So I think that you covered some really great bases there about like internal sponsor as well as mentors. So let me give you an example on the other end of the spectrum, right? Like a peer, right? I would say, and like I said, I didn't really use the term a board of directors early in my career, but I did have a very strong set of friends. And my friends come from all over the world, very diverse group. And let me start by answering this question that I was in the chat as well, which is like, how do you select people, right? And the really great thing about friends, they're part of my board of directors as coaches, is because all of us are different, and you can see strengths in different people. Like some of them, they say are really great public speakers. Some of them might be really good at, I don't know, maybe like a technical skill that you want to develop. I had a really good friend of mine, a peer of mine from grad school, and she was really, really great at networking, right? She was going the consultant route. She needed to do it really well. And I have to admit, it was something that I was struggling with because, from my general background, the idea that, and we were encouraged to do this, right? Like, hey, just reach out to people, look at people in the companies that you like. That didn't really resonate with me at all, because I felt very uncomfortable reaching out to someone that I don't know, basically asking for a favor. And culturally, that was something that I was still like, it's extremely rude to do that, right? So I reached out to this friend of mine who really was excelling at that. And she told me, like, you know what, you're looking at it the wrong way, because it is a mutually beneficial relationship. Like, true, like you might not know them, but think about it this way: it's incredibly expensive to recruit the right people. And there are all the stats out there that show that people that are recommended by other great employees actually tend to perform and do better, right? And now I know that there's all these incentives internally, so that if you recommend, you actually get a bonus, right? So there is that value out there, right? You just, and she said something that that really stuck with me, which is like, you just need to make sure that you are very professional and that you make the most of the other person's time, because you don't know this person, right? So if you reach out to them, have bullet points of, let's say you want to get a job, right? Like you find a really great opportunity, highlighting how you are a great fit for that position. Yeah, make the process very easy for them, so that when you have that talk, you're also ready to kind of establish that first conversation on why you can also help fill out that role in their company, right? And you know what, that really changed the way that I was looking at this. I started looking at it as me asking for a favor, but more like, hey, here is a problem that we can solve together. And we do have, of course, this great connection, because let's say we went to the same school, kind of let's make the best out of it, right? And I would say that really provided a big impact in my career, because after that point, quite frankly, I've never applied to a job through like the regular channels, just like sending my resume blindly. I always made sure that if I didn't have a direct connection to the company, that I would find someone else that could introduce me to, so that I didn't have to go through that process, right? So once again, this is more story on the other side of the spectrum, how somebody who's at your same level, but you see them excelling in different skills, there are also great opportunities to make them part of your board of directors.
That is so true. I love all those points. And that point on, you can find people wherever they are. It doesn't have to be someone much more senior. It can be a former colleague that you've really connected with, someone that's on your team and you really admire. I know a lot of my personal board of directors are made up of former colleagues, either at my level or more senior, and we've really stayed in touch throughout the years. Maite, I loved your comment as well. Touching on our audience question on what makes it mutually beneficial for them, on how it is beneficial for people to fill in that role of our personal board of directors, because of how that just smooths things along in the world of kind of, recruiting for roles. So that is great to hear about your journey. So kind of diving back into it, y'all have talked a lot about how you identify who you want to be on your board, how we get over that hump of asking people to join that inner circle, and that's a huge part of it. But obviously, I know y'all are senior leaders at Salesforce, and you're obviously really busy. And at the end of the day, when people are working to kind of to level up and be in control of their careers, you have to put a lot of energy into kind of keeping these relationships going. So I want to ask y'all, how can we be intentional about, continuing to build on our relationships with our board of directors? And how do we really leverage these people that are really in our corner? Alex, I'll pass it to you first.
So I do a couple of things. One, if I've already had a really close relationship with you, and maybe you move to a different department, or maybe you leave the organization, or I've left an organization, I will make a concerted effort to reach out to them every 6 months or so even to just say like, hey, how are you doing? Because as Maite mentioned, I'm very similar, where reaching out to someone when I need something feels very rude. Like it feels like, no, this should be a relationship that I nurture and continue. So I try to make sure that most of my interactions are normal relationship types of things. And then also within my organization, or at least aside from like when there's newer people that I'm getting to know, I will set up one-on-ones with them. And one of the things that I've been told by other people on my team that I do really well is making sure that I have those regular touch points with people that I'm still getting to know, and like we're learning how to work together. And also ultimately over the course of time, some of those people I'll ultimately reach out to and be like, hey, is it okay if I keep reaching out to you, even if we aren't working together, just to keep that relationship going. And usually by that point, people are very much like, yes, absolutely, because it is valuable to both parties. And I know there was also a question earlier about like, well, if you're very new in your career, what do you have to offer? And I think one of the things that people don't quite appreciate is that even when you're very new, the thing that you have a lot to offer because you are new. As a senior leader, as you're growing your teams, a lot of what we have to think about is how do you grow people? How do you coach people and help them navigate the world that they're now in? And so when you're young and new in your career, that's a golden opportunity for us. That's incredibly helpful. But yeah, Maite, what about you?
No, I completely hear you. And to add to what you were saying, I think that it is so incredibly valuable to have a fresh set of eyes, take a look at a problem and help you evolve it. And I want to kind of summarize it this way, and maybe I didn't mention this in my last comment, but it's at the heart of it. You have a lot of value, right? All you have to do is package it in a certain way, depending on what the approach is or what the level of the relationship is that you have. There is still one rule that you need to follow, which is you need to be respectful of people's time, right? So you need to make sure that you put yourself out there, but don't forget that, right? Like you have a lot of value. And I'd say, like looking at the last few months, I had an assistant product manager just last year of school joining my team. And his perspective was just golden to me. He had really great product instincts, but also, quite frankly, we're looking at a lot of generative AI, for example, and the ethical dilemmas. And it was extremely refreshing to me to hear a young person's take, right, on what that means to their day-to-day lives, right? So don't discount that. Now, when it comes to just being intentional about having touch points with your board of directors, I would say that you have to be a fierce project manager, no matter what you're doing. You have to make sure that you have blocks of time that you dedicated, that you know you're not going to compromise. And no matter what your career choice is, there's one golden rule that they say that it's for product managers, but I believe it's for everyone, which is you need to master the art of saying no and make sure that you do prioritize areas that are going to give you that long-term investment. So one, you have to make the time, right? Work on your schedule. The second one is always have a plan. Even if it's a very, let's say, established relationship, I always make sure that maybe I'm not going to put an agenda out there like it's already a friend of mine, but I know like, hey, it's work hours. Even if it's a friend of mine, I want to make sure that here are 3 points that I want to discuss. You need to prepare the conversation based on who your audience is, right? Like if you're talking to a sponsor or somebody who has very little time and it's an extremely busy professional, make sure like maybe you need something for them to react to. Maybe you want them to take a look at a slide that you prepare, which is much better than you going 5 minutes about something that happened to you. So the bottom line is know your audience and be prepared, right? Make most of the time that you have, no matter if it's a formal or an informal relationship. And I think that will give you a really good results when it comes to like building your board of directors, but also maintaining it.
I love that intentionality. Thank you, Maite. So bringing it back, our final question, bringing it back to DEI, I want to talk about one of the most common questions that mentors get, which is how to show up as your authentic self. And this is a really common question, especially in the tech space, and especially being a woman or being a Latina. We might not have felt completely comfortable being our authentic selves. So I know through my close relationship with Salesforce here at Power to Fly that Salesforce is really committed to building a diverse workforce where everyone feels seen, heard, valued, and empowered to succeed. What has been y'all's experience with bringing your authentic self to work, and how has that affected your work and your career? So Alex, I'll pass it to you for this final question first.
Yes. So at Salesforce, we have these different groups. I'm going to call them kind of like clubs, but basically like there's one for the Latinx community. There's different ones for different organizations. And at my level, we have a meeting about once a month where all the directors can get together and just talk through different issues. And it's incredibly helpful to kind of have that sounding board in each other and that chance to be able to talk about different things that we might face. So it makes it very easy to show up as your authentic self, because we can have much more open conversations compared to organizations that I've worked at where maybe we didn't have that experience. But I think it is an interesting thing that we get to kind of work on throughout the course of our careers and our lives around like, how do we show up? What does it mean to be our authentic selves? And I think that what I have found, at least over the course of my career, are that the places that are really inviting for me to be my authentic self, I will just naturally kind of fit into those spaces much more easily. And so as a result, when I'm looking for the next job or the next opportunity, I tend to gravitate towards those spaces, and they fit a lot better. And it just is something that kind of organically flows for me. And I find that better, at least for me, than trying to kind of shove myself into an environment that's maybe a little bit less inviting. But on the whole, I have found Salesforce to be very, very inviting because they have these different spaces and they are on the whole very welcoming to everybody.
Thank you so much for that. Oh, go ahead, Wendy.
No, Maite, your last word, and then we'll wrap it up.
That sounds really good. So I would say that actually it's a little bit the opposite. It's like it's not only that you need to feel free to be your authentic self, but I would say you are gonna get the best results. I think that there's all this literature now about the power of being authentic. And if I think back, I think it is that the better result that I got in like even managing through influence or talking to my teams have been when I've been vulnerable, right? And being able to like really speak in a message that I am comfortable with, right? So I mean, we're all people, right? And 90% of what you say doesn't necessarily come from the words that you're saying. There's a lot of body language, right? So I think that if you really want to make an impactful conversation, you need to be authentic, you need to be vulnerable, and you need to leave your guard down a little bit. I completely echo what Alexandra said. I think that I've always tried to do that in my career. I find it extremely powerful and easy to do so at Salesforce, right? Like I don't feel like, I don't know, maybe it's little things. They're not all these like cookie cutter type of events that you need to attend and they kind of forced on you and oh, I guess I should like sports, right? Like, so I think that you do have the latitude to create an environment that reflects a bit more, let's say, how you want to communicate, the things that you want to do even like work related stuff. Like, hey, we're going to talk about product, like maybe we do something else other than a brown bag, right? So I would say it's not only being free to be your authentic self, but see that as a better way to reach out to people and have more impact in the message that you're trying to convey.
I love that. I love that. Maite, Alex, thanks so much for your time. Audience, thanks for joining in. And one last thing, if you want to stay in touch with Salesforce, feel free to join their talent community. It's salesforce.com/careers to learn about open roles, get tips on improving your career. So awesome. Thanks so much for turning in. I'm going to turn it back over to our moderator, Meg, to keep the content going as part of our summit. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you to Wendy, Maite, and Alex.